During their first scene together, Susie slams Chris into a locker. Then she tells Chris that they're worthless, and then she threatens to bite Chris's face off. So that's not a good start. Well, it could be a good start if Chris is freaky, but canonically we don't know if Chris is freaky, so I'm just gonna assume that this isn't a good thing. The way that I was gonna do this video was that I was gonna look at every scene where Chris and Susie interact and see if there's anything romantic there. But with chapter 1, I can't really do that because Susie is too busy being evil, and Chris isn't even a character yet. Chris and Susie don't even interact all that much at first. In chapter 1, Ralsei is the one that talks to Susie most of the time, and he's just like, "Susie, stop being a jerk." And Susie's like, "I'm gonna build a duck just to piss you off." And Chris just isn't a character in chapter 1. Unlike later chapters where they do things on their own and there's a bunch of dialogue that shows Chris being affected by our actions, in this chapter that doesn't happen at all. The main reason why they don't is because you're not even supposed to know that Chris is their own character yet. It's only until the twist at the end of the chapter where it's revealed that you and Chris are different people, and Chris is just letting you control their body for some reason. And back to Susie, she's not only rude to Chris, she just hates everyone. Like when Chris and Susie first meet Ralsei, she calls him a weirdo and just leaves. Then after she leaves, she ruins this guy's cake by eating it so hard that smoke comes out of it. But I think the worst thing that Susie does is what she does to Lancer. From the very moment we meet Lancer, one thing is made very clear. He's just a little boy. During Lancer's second encounter, he starts his evil villain speech by saying, "Well, flip my flapjacks?" And his evil laugh is, "Ho, ho, ho." Okay, he's just a little kid trying to act evil. So, what does Susie decide to do to this kid playing villain? Well, Susie tells him to shut up, then she walks towards him, grabs him by the neck, and threatens to bite his face off. Like, Susie, dude, calm the f*** down. And this is a good thing, actually. Lancer is the first person to not be afraid of Susie and actually admires how evil she acts. And Susie, feeling appreciated for the first time, actually lets her guard down near Lancer. This eventually leads to Susie ditching Chris and Ralsei so that she can go be evil with Lancer. Now there is a bit of a rough patch in their friendship when Lancer apparently betrays her and locks her up in his dad's dungeon. But Susie finds out that Lancer only did that because he didn't want Susie and the king to fight, because, they're gonna kill each other and stuff. So she forgives him and promises that she'll find a way to get through the king without fighting. Thanks to Lancer's friendship, Susie realizes something very important. Having friends is actually pretty cool. Maybe when I meet people for the first time, I shouldn't immediately grab their neck and also threaten to kill them. And so, because of Susie's changed views on friendship, Chris and Susie actually have a genuine heart-to-heart the next time they meet. Susie puts her faith in Chris and tells them that she wants to try acting on Darkeners and learn to spare them. Susie tells Chris that she's counting on them before she joins the party for real. Now this scene is really important. For the first time ever, Susie talks to Chris as an equal. Not only that, she confides in them and shows some vulnerability. But unfortunately, a big flaw with this scene is that Chris doesn't say or do anything to show that they actually care about what Susie just said. In fact, we never get to see if Chris actually cares about Susie during this entire chapter. I understand that in order for the twist at the end to work, Chris has to do literally nothing on their own until the very end. But I just wish that there was one moment in this chapter where Chris shows that they care about Susie, even when we're not in control of them. There actually is one moment, though. I was just messing around, guys. Once the heroes defeat the Chaos King, he convinces them into healing him because he's done being evil now, but boom, he's actually still evil. The king decides to finish Susie off first. But then, for the first time in the story, Chris decides to do something completely on their own. That's right. The first thing that Chris ever does on their own is protecting Susie. This scene alone proves that Chris cares about Susie and that we're not just forcing them to like her. Okay, back to the fight against the Chaos King. The king grabbed me and I'm about to die. Susie decides to return the favor and helps out Chris, telling the king to get away from her friend. This moment right here marks the very beginning of Chris and Susie's friendship. And so, with the power of friendship, and also Lancer showing up and helping us spare the king, we seal the fountain and return to the real world. After going through everything together, Susie, with kind eyes and a genuine smile on her face, tells Chris that she wants to have more adventures together, and that they should head for the Dark World again tomorrow. And that was Chapter 1. So, were there any hints of Krusie becoming a thing, or any foreshadowing of it at all? Hell no! Out of 10. Chris and Susie hated each other when the story started, so it's pretty much impossible for any romantic stuff to be set up since the plot has to make them friends first. And when that finally happens, there's only 10 minutes left in the chapter. Basically, Chapter 1 had to focus on Chris and Susie becoming friends in a natural way first. But now that that's done, we can now truly begin enforcing the Krusie agenda. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 doesn't feature much character development for Chris and Susie. Instead, most of the character focus is put on classmates Birdley and Noelle, who got sucked into the Dark World while studying in the library's computer lab. With Birdley, Chris and Susie teach him that it's okay to not be perfect, and also that when he makes statues of himself where he has nipples in a diaper, you shouldn't do that. And with Noelle, Susie helps her become more confident, Wait, Susie, what are you doing? Susie! Noelle obviously has a giant crush on you, so whatever you do not get into that heart-shaped Ferris wheel with her and have the most romantic conversation of all time. That would ruin the entire point of my video. So please do not get in. No! Noelle was hinted at having a crush on Susie during Chapter 1, but Chapter 2 is when she shows it in full force. I wonder if Susie would want to ride with me. She wouldn't. You're right. Even if I asked her, she'd probably just laugh at me. And gosh, push me to the ground and laugh at me some more and then... Noelle. What? Noelle and Susie's growing relationship is one of the main storylines in Chapter 2, with the story beginning because Noelle invites Susie over to the library for a study date. Then, during the Dark World section, we have the aforementioned Ferris wheel scene, where they get to know each other and have a sweet conversation. And lastly, during the final moments of the game, we have Noelle teasing Susie about her tail and leaving Susie kind of flustered. All of this points to Noelle and Susie ending up together. If they don't, then it would be terrible writing, and all of these scenes would become pointless. Well, that sucks. But hey, look on the bright side. Susie might have gotten a love interest, but with Chris, we literally control them. And there is no way that I'm gonna let them get into a romantic situation like how Susie did. Wait, Chris, what are you doing? Chris, whatever you do not go into the tunnel of love with Ralsei. Or do actually, I don't really care. Chris and Ralsei have a whole section where they ride the tunnel of love together, but nothing romantic happens. In fact, you can choose to be a total asshole to him the entire time. So that's nice. Chris also has a really long section with Noelle, but it's nothing to worry about. They just talk about how they used to be friends as kids and how that stopped because Noelle's sister got trapped in the game's code and is begging for help or something. Whatever. And as for the Chris and Susie section, there isn't one. So let me explain just how f***ed we are. Not only has Noelle been added as an actual love interest for Susie, but what's arguably worse for you guys is that Chris and Susie barely hang out at all in this chapter. But you know what? None of that matters. The only thing that matters to us is that Noelle and Susie don't end up together by the end of the chapter, which means that for now, Chris still has a chance. And it's true that Chris and Susie don't hang out a lot in this chapter, but all we need to do is find one moment that even somewhat hints at Krusie becoming a thing. At least then we can upgrade Krusie from borderline fanfiction into something that exists in the game. Let's try to find some evidence in the main story first. During the intro, Susie tells Chris that they should keep the Dark World a secret because she wants the adventures to be their thing and theirs alone. That's sweet, right? Just as they're about to enter the Dark World, Susie says that she couldn't stop thinking about the last adventure they had. That's something, right? They hold hands, right? Those three moments are the closest we get to something romantic in the main story. And as you can obviously tell, it's not much. Okay, Krapith, we have to move on to the side content. And if there isn't anything there, it's kinda over. Okay, first off, there's this enemy you can encounter called Pop-Up. They attack by spamming you with ads based on stuff that you like. And for Chris, one of their ads is about a service that provides monsters for humans in your area. Wow, so it finally happened. Chris is now confirmed to be freaky. Halfway through the story, Chris and Susie meet up again after being split up. And after you win the orb tossing game, you have the option of giving your prize to one of the four main characters. If you give the gift to Susie, you can tell that she secretly appreciates it even if she doesn't like showing it. And she immediately tries to win a prize for Chris so they can be even. By the way, something really weird happens during this scene and I can't explain it. After Chris gives Susie the gift, her sprite changes from her normal sprite to one where she has one extra pixel below her eye. This is the only time the sprite is used, and I don't know what the hell it means. Is it supposed to be her blushing or squinting? I have no idea, but Chris has officially made Susie blush or maybe squint. We're making progress. Near the end of the Chris and Noelle section is an optional room that has some moss in the corner. If you touch the moss, you get some funny dialogue and your title is changed to Moss Finder. However, if you wait until you reunite with Susie and backtrack all the way back to this room, you're rewarded with a hidden cutscene. Susie acknowledges that Chris waited until they were with her again to eat the moss and gives them a slight compliment. Then, you eat the moss. Together. After you rescue your classmates and seal the fountain, you have the option of exploring the light world for a bit. And if you go to the bunker area, you can find Monster Kid and Snowy. Monster Kid is scared of the bunker, mainly because of something that Chris said about it. Snowy responds by taunting Monster Kid, asking if he's gonna act all chicken like how Chris did. The moment Snowy makes fun of Chris, Susie immediately stands up for them and scares the two away. And then promptly asks Chris if they're okay. This is probably my favorite moment out of all of these, because for this whole chapter, we didn't really see Susie acting like how she did back in chapter 1. But here, we get to see that this side of her is still there. Only this time, she uses her bully persona in a better way, as a means to stand up for her friend. And I think it's really sweet. And that's it. There's a few more scenes that I could cover, but I would just be wasting your time, because they all share one big issue. You could easily say that Chris gave Susie the gift because they're a good friend. You could easily say that eating moss behind a dumpster is just something that best friends do. And you could easily say that Susie stood up for Chris because she didn't like seeing somebody making fun of her friend. I tried finding a single line of dialogue that hints at something romantic between these two. Even if it was completely optional or a joke or something, it wouldn't matter because it would at least mean that Krusie is in the game. But this game is hell-bent on showing Chris and Susie's relationship as strictly platonic. And that's fine, But the whole point of this video is to find out if Krusie is a thing that could actually happen in the game. And at this point, I think we found our answer. Krusie will not. I was just messing around, guys. If you go to the police station and talk to Undyne, she tells you about an incident where she saw Alphys crash her bike. And because she feels bad, she gives you a box of chocolates and asks you to deliver them to Alphys. However, if you instead decide to eat the chocolates... Whoa, Chris, where the hell did you get that? Someone gave it to you? Yeah, right. You stole it, didn't you? Well, come on. Let's eat it and hide the evidence. You and Susie shared the heart-shaped box of candies. Both of you had a feeling in your chest. Ow, my stomach. That you shouldn't have eaten all of it. This scene shouldn't be impactful. First off, it's completely optional. Secondly, Chris and Susie don't actually feel anything romantic here. And lastly, this is one big tease, with it trying to make you think that something romantic is about to happen, when in reality, it's just a setup for a joke. But I don't care! Before this moment, Krusie was just some fan-fiction ship. In fact, you could have probably said that any mention of this ship was being deliberately avoided at all costs. But because of this scene, Krusie has an official mention in Deltarune, and this means that the next 2 chapters could follow suit. This is a really small win, I know, but at least we can finish this chapter off with a little bit of hope. The final scene of chapter 2 features Susie hanging out at Chris's house. Toriel teaches Susie how to bake a pie while Chris goes to freshen up in the bathroom. And by that, I mean they jump out the window and slash their mom's tires. And then they come back and act like they didn't just do that. Toriel checks her car and sees that her tires were slashed, so obviously she calls the cops and tells Susie that she should stay over. After that, Chris and Susie get comfy on the couch and watch some TV. And after a while, Susie asks Chris who they would like to take to the festival tomorrow. Strangely, if you choose any of the options that aren't Susie, Chris answers in a really dry and weird tone, implying that they're just saying it because you're making them say it. However, Chris's way of answering is natural if you choose Susie. So unlike everybody else, Chris genuinely wants to hang out with Susie more. Susie's surprised and tells Chris that they're obviously going to go to the festival together. I mean, is that even a question? Anyway, enough with the mushy stuff. We have a monster movie marathon to watch. 12 hours of building-bashing, car-crunching action. We are locked in! Chris and Susie rest for the next adventure in store tomorrow. Well, that is, until Chris opens up a dark world inside their house. For what reason? Maybe they were bored. While chapters 1 and 2 were focused on developing the world of Deltarune, its characters, and their relationships, chapter 3 is mostly focused on cooking, rocking, and is that the fucking night? Tenna is Chris's old television that was brought to life after Chris opened up the Dark World, and most of the chapter is us participating in his game show. Now, I wish I could cover Tenna's game show, but there's basically no Krusie content here. There are some funny interactions, like how Susie names herself Ass, and if you name yourself Ass too, Susie will be very proud of Chris. Yogurt attack! There's also this part where you switch controllers with Susie and you can play as her in the game for a bit. And if you want, you can equip a ribbon on her and she'll get really mad and shove Chris. It's not really that important to mention, but I thought it was funny. Look, guys, it's our first Krusie moment. They're standing next to each other on the Love Island with matching ribbons. Rawl say piss off. Other than that, though, this entire game show portion is just dumb fun. And while there are a ton of funny interactions between the 3 heroes and Tenna, that's not what we're here for, so let's move on. The second half of Chapter 3 is about Tenna going crazy after the heroes try to leave him to go seal the fountain. He then betrays and traps them and forces them to continue playing his game show against their will. The heroes do eventually find a way to escape the show, but with Tenna on their tail, they have to make a mad dash towards the fountain before Tenna captures them again. After evading Tenna for a while, the heroes finally find a quiet place to rest for a bit. And it's at this point where Chris and Susie have the most serious conversation that they've had in a long time. Susie tells Chris that she's still thinking about how no one in the dark world is real, and Ralsei telling her that when she starts making real friends, she should just forget about everybody in the dark world. You can choose between 3 different ways to cheer Susie up, but only one of these responses will result in Chris being genuine. If you choose the 2 corny options on the left and right, then Chris will say them in a very sarcastic and exaggerated tone, as being this overtly sentimental isn't something that Chris likes doing. Since Chris talks so weird, Susie doesn't take Chris's kind words seriously. Instead, she makes fun of Chris for sounding strange, and the conversation will then shift into them joking around for a bit. If you choose "sucks to be you," Chris will talk normally and tease Susie for getting all serious. Susie fires back by making fun of Chris for having no friends, bringing up how happy Toriel was when Chris finally found a friend within her. Susie then falls silent, the thought of how different their relationship used to be ruminating in her mind. She then tells Chris how stupid it is that they just now became friends. What I love about this scene is that Susie only becomes vulnerable if you choose the option that lets Chris be real. It shows that Susie likes Chris the most when they're being themselves, and not when we, as the player, are forcing Chris to say or do things that they don't agree with. And apart from that, it's nice to see Susie reflect on how important Chris has become in her life, and seeing her wish they had become friends sooner is really great too. Sadly though, the room after this leads to the final boss and then the chapter's over, so this is the only real one-on-one conversation that Chris and Susie have in this entire chapter. Honestly, the only other time that they have a conversation alone like this is a small scene after you defeat the secret boss of the chapter. If you don't know, you can find a secret room in the lobby which has an old video game console that Chris can play. The further you get into the game, the more Chris tries to stop you from playing further. And it's all because of a secret that they're desperately trying to hide from you. In the end, it's revealed that Chris made a deal with Tenna behind our back. Chris told Tenna to distract Susie and Ralsei with his game show for as long as possible. Why exactly? So that the Knight could have enough time to capture Undyne, the police officer. That's right, Chris is working with the Knight, and if you don't know, the Knight's main goal is to start the Roaring. And if you don't know what the Roaring is, it's this whole thing where the world explodes. So yeah, Chris wants to destroy the world or something, but look on the bright side. After this, Susie comes in and we get to have a nice conversation. Yes! This scene is pretty short. Susie just shows up and asks Chris what they're doing. And then she asks if they even enjoy the video game they're playing. What?